fine thing, and it is. What would you give me? The obvious 5-star rating, or would you be a liar?
It's Taylor Mannix.
Am I going from prime red to, I don't know, weird brother of prime red?
Call 207-775-2217 or 6-811-9505.
You're a good guy.
It's French. I don't know why I know that. I took 4 years of Spanish.
You know hermano?
Hermano?
Brother.
As in, here's hermano.
Middays with Mannix and Mannix begins now. Here's Jeff and Taylor.
You're going to fail and bomb and gag and fail and bomb.
Yalla, let's go. Good afternoon. Welcome into your final hour of this Mannix Monday edition of Middays with Mannix and Mannix. Jeff and Taylor with you, and as we do to start the final hour of every Monday, it's time to talk a little college football. We're joined on the line by former college football coach and the host of the Catch Up with Coach podcast, Malik Hall. Malik, thanks for joining us as the calendar's getting towards the middle of November. It only means that the football gets more and more important at the college level.
That's the deal. No, do not lose in November. How you know how we have a don't shave November? If you want to be a championship team, do not lose in November.
No, I was going to say, I mean, that's a good place to start it because I think there was 2 games that really stood out. One of them was a team that didn't lose and remains undefeated in TCU over Texas, and what ended up being an extremely defensive battle out of something I think a lot of people expected to see some offense. And then the loss, Oregon, and I didn't think Bo Nix really played himself out of the Heisman, but Oregon definitely played themselves out of any chance of making the playoff or anything like that with the Washington loss. So TCU winning, Oregon losing for me, Malik, were some of the things that I saw going into this week. What do those 2 wins and losses mean for you?
Okay, I have a brother-in-law who buys all Oregon stuff. He won't pick up my call. That's how devastated he was, right? Okay, and so because to be quite frank, we speak about it week in, week out. Oregon was the team in the Pac-12 that had claims on it because their only loss was really to the number 1 team in the country who was smoking everyone. And so for me, and I hate to say I have to disagree with you, Tay. Like, Bo Nix needed a Heisman Trophy winning game. And being that he didn't do well against Georgia, will he even have that opportunity moving forward before Tennessee, before Michigan? And so I look at it for Oregon. You talk about holding the line. They had to take care of business. They were in charge of their destiny. And unfortunately, man, that loss is almost going to bury them.
Yeah, it very well might here, especially since they've got to face Utah next, and then they've got the Civil War game against Oregon State to close out the season. So, I mean, it does feel like Oregon did themselves no favors at all here in this one. And at the same time, I mean, maybe Utah can be considered a team that might eke in there, but it kind of feels like it might have washed the Pac-12's chances of reaching the playoff out.
Yeah, and part of it, as we discussed last week, is based on TCU continuing to hold the line at number 4. If TCU wins out, whether you like TCU, don't like TCU, strength of schedule, like, they will be the Big 12 winners, and no one should be able to jump them in the line as they sit here undefeated. And so, you know, if there was going to be an argument for it, everyone had to win out, and the team who had the legitimate case, again, was Oregon. And now, if something happens where TCU drops, now are you jumping Tennessee? So it's so many variables in this where now we're back to a 2-team SEC playoff potentially if the Big 12 doesn't hold the line because the Pac-12 didn't.
Yeah, well, and again, switching over to TCU, they kept things going. They were able to upend a team in Texas, and of course, a big one for them, now up to 10-0, sitting in the top 4 with Michigan, Ohio State. We know one of those 2 teams will fall out, especially once they play each other. TCU now really is in the driver's seat to win out and make this playoff. What do you think it is for them looking forward? They obviously have that really one big test in Baylor left, and they'll have to win a Pac-12 championship.
Look, man, they are a gritty team. They're They do not win impressive by large amounts. Fact is, Texas had them on the ropes in the fourth quarter. And they just continue to slug it out, slug it out. Shout out to Coach Sonny Dykes over there. You know, he's a baseball guy, so there's some merit to, you know, managing a football club in such a way where they can peak right where they need to peak and win the close ball games. I mean, like the quarterback wasn't great. He was 17 for 39. He only threw, the Texas quarterback wasn't great. He only threw it for 171 yards. So, like, to me, um, Texas defense kept them in the game, but TCU just kept plugging away and kept doing what TCU has been doing. And that's what got them there this far, by running the ball. And they ran the ball for almost 200 yards.
Yeah, most certainly getting the job done there. Pretty much everybody else at the top took care of business like they were supposed to. Georgia 45-19 at Mississippi State. Ohio State just steamrolling Indiana at home. And Michigan doing the same to Nebraska. And Tennessee at the same time, again, maybe staking a claim that if anybody drops from the top four, it should be us that go back in. 66 points against Missouri here. Do you think, I'm interested too with both LSU and Alabama winning for you, kind of where that lays things out for the teams that are outside the top four, but might be able to climb their way back in? And which of those, I mean, is it Tennessee that's the most likely to, you think?
The point margin is the statement there. 66 points. Like, there's no gray area for if Alabama ends up beating or losing, or LSU loses. Like, at this point, we're talking style points, unfortunately. And I'm not sure that that's a good thing for college football, but Tennessee had to beat Missouri like definitively, and they did that. Missouri, early in the year, we would have thought Missouri would have been in the conversation. LSU, now look, talk about convincing wins, definitive wins. Like, this wasn't close. LSU made it a barn burner against Arkansas, right? And so that's, unfortunately, the voters and, the powers that be are looking at margin of win. And if you're going to say, if it's LSU on the outs, Tennessee on the out, Tennessee's margin of win is much more impressive. Even Alabama, Lane Kiffin almost got them, right? And so margin of victory is going to play a part in these next few weeks. I'm going to tell you guys who was a team that probably is really pissed off, excuse me, if I can say that word on the radio.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, it's North Carolina. They have one loss,
BC, man.
and their one loss is to Notre Dame. Like, if you're looking at them in the ACC, they can't get above the top 15 at this point, and they're only with one loss, and they just beat a really good Wake Forest, who was on fire early. And so when you look at a North Carolina might win the ACC title game and still may not get into the playoff conversation. And so, and then that speaks to, again, TCU and Tennessee having to, TCU take care of business, Tennessee takes care of business. One of those two teams will be in the playoff.
Yeah, especially when you mentioned NC State losing. Well, I mean, UNC here, NC State losing to BC, they're pretty much out on that one.
Yep.
That was crazy. 1 point loss at home this past weekend. But North Carolina, you mentioned it, Drake May, who led North Carolina their fifth second half comeback win of the season. I mean, he threw for 448 yards, ran for 71 more, 4 touchdowns in the 36-34 win there against Wade. I mean, how good is this kid? And I think, you're kind of right. This is also a Mac Brown coach team.
Yep.
It's a guy who knows how to win. He's got a college football mind. We saw what he did with UT and down in Texas, and really kind of building that program to where it was. Now he's up here at UNC, and it feels like he's almost an ACC championship away from kind of completing that almost evolution of UNC football. I mean, How do you feel about where Mac Brown and Drake May have this program, and just expand a little bit on this team that's standing at 9-1 right now and first in the ACC?
The Tar Heels, like you said, you hit it on the nose. The X factor is Coach Brown. Coach Brown, I think, is in his 70s, but when you understand the psychological makeup of football players and how the kid is changing, but the X's and O's hasn't, like this kid, like he threw for almost 400 yards. And they do not have like their schedule has not been weak by a long shot. And they have to finish with a Georgia Tech, finish with NC State, who just lost to Boston College by one, and then close out with Clemson, who's trying to fight for really their ACC lives. So in my mind, Coach Brown is well prepared his team. And this is a North Carolina Tar Heel team that has really been really under the radar, maybe because it's Mac Brown and he's not the young wonder out there. But listen, he's beating everybody that he's needed to beat, including Duke, including Miami, and in my space, the Wake Forest win was the bigger win of them yet. And so I think they got their hands cut out for him the next 3 weeks. But if so, you said it, Tay. Mac Brown could be an ACC championship coach.
And I'm interested to get your thoughts here too, because you talk about not wanting to lose in November, and it's gone sideways for a couple of programs here over the last few weeks. That a month ago we were talking about, wow, they might actually be something here. The first one is Syracuse, who was unbeaten 4 weeks ago, gave Clemson a game, and now's lost 4 straight. And the other, Illinois, who just lost their second in a row this past week. They're still ranked, although I doubt they'll be in the top 25 now when they face Michigan here next week after losing to Purdue.
Man, and to think Florida State, who we didn't feel had any quality wins, is now in the top 25 because they beat a Syracuse who went on a 6-0 run. And so it's amazing what we often say in the coaching world: don't let one loss turn to 2 losses, and 2 losses turn to 3. Unfortunately, that's what's happening right now with Syracuse. That Clemson loss, which was a tight game, is just unraveled. The wheels are starting to come off the vehicle right now. And Illinois, I think they just, they want to run the ball, period. That's what Illinois wants to do. I don't know if you guys remember, but the head coach is the old Wisconsin head coach. And so, they Purdue conference matchup, they needed to beat Purdue for them to really put a stake on the Western end. But that's a tough loss, not a bad loss. Is in rival, and Purdue is they have a winning record this year. The one the upset that I was actually very, very surprised to see was the Kentucky Vanderbilt win. Vanderbilt, who, whenever you are the team who hasn't gotten a win in conference, you are the most dangerous team, because at that point, no one wants to say they gave you your first win, right? And for Kentucky and Coach Stoops to be on a trending up and to drop to Vandy, shout out to the head coach at Vandy and the quarterback M right there. But that was a bad loss for Kentucky in my mind.
I was going to say I agree. Just to add to that point, it's the first road SEC win since October 2018 for the Commodores. I mean, it has been a long and bad run. First SEC win since 2019 in general.
Right.
Vanderbilt's been pretty bad. So I'm with you, Malik. That loss for Kentucky, especially when we feel like that Kentucky program over the past 3 seasons took strides to take a step back with that one. Should mention, too, Jeff was right. Illinois has dropped out of the top 25 along with Liberty, Texas, and NC State. Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina, Oklahoma State, Oregon State all replaced them. Want to talk about one team in particular, Malik, too, now. Again, Notre Dame. They've kind of found this resurgence because we're talking a lot about these ACC teams who have fallen off the wayside. Notre Dame's been a big reason for that, beating Syracuse, beating Clemson. They had a tough match with Navy. But the one on the schedule in 2 weeks that I'm looking at is the USC, who's number 8, who at this point in the Pac-12 is really the last hope of making the playoffs. It's USC if they're able to somehow run the table. and maybe they get a little sympathy from the committee with only one loss record. But they're pretty much in. They're going to be kind of squaring up right now. It looks like would be Notre Dame, who's ranked 20th. How do you feel about this Notre Dame in the second half team? Does it kind of look like a team that's really started to buy into Marcus Freeman, and you're going to actually see this transition we keep hearing from Notre Dame fans?
Yeah, I would agree 100% with you. Notre Dame, Notre Dame is one of the blue blood programs of college football. So, and it doesn't help that they had to start their season against Ohio State. Okay, so you take it, and they a competitor. Put it this way: the margin of that victory from Ohio State has been the closest margin they've had.
It looks like a good loss now on Notre Dame, almost, if there is such thing.
Yeah, like they lose to Ohio State 21-10, but then they lose to Marshall, and that part, it was almost like, oh, Notre Dame stinks, including myself. Okay, I'm in that boat. Now, when you look at what they pulled off to keep going, they beat a Cal, they beat a North Carolina who we just acknowledged, they beat a BYU who was on fire early, losing to Stanford, bad loss. Outside of that, the Stanford and Marshall loss are the losses that were tough, but the fact that they have rebounded and beat a number 16 Clemson, a number 4 Clemson, a number 16 Syracuse, and they came back to beat Navy. Now, in good fashion, like you guys said, they have to go to California, and that will probably be a night game. It'll be everything that we want it to be, and it will say everything that we need to say about the future of Notre Dame potentially as they usher in a new coach and a new regime.
I'm blown away too now that you bring it up. If they don't have that loss to Marshall and Stanford,
right?
I mean, we're talking about Notre Dame probably competing for the top spot because their only loss would be to number 2 Ohio State, and you'd have wins versus North Carolina, BYU, Syracuse. I mean, those 2 hiccups might really be killer for them, especially if they beat USC. I mean, we'll be sitting here going, wow, what could have been for Notre Dame?
Yeah, doesn't the committee wish they expanded the field to 12 for this year?
Right,
I think everything that's happening this year will confirm the expansion, and so much so that a year from today, we'll see a late run from a Notre Dame and close out and beat a number 5 USC or a number 6 USC or vice versa. You see that last surge is almost equivalent to the NFL wildcard spot. And so you're right, Jeff and Tay. Like, Notre Dame would be in the conversation with only one loss to the number 2 team, Ohio State, who by margin has kept Ohio State to the closest winning percentage or winning margin than anyone up until Michigan, knock on wood.
Yeah, there you go. Because this time of year here in November, you start to get your rivalry matchups, and we've got one of them here. Because Taylor mentioned USC with Notre Dame in a couple of weeks. Well, they've got the game against UCLA this week, which to me is starting to stack up not only as a big rivalry game, but maybe as one that can go a long way in deciding the Pac-12. UCLA coming off a pretty bad loss against Arizona, an unranked Arizona, and USC will try to take care of business there going to the Rose Bowl. But besides USC, UCLA, is there any that jump out at you for next week?
Yeah, I love that game. I love UCLA, USC. That's the Battle of the Rose Bowl. It is a good game. I want to tell you this will be the game as a rearrangement of the Pac-12. I'm hoping that this is one of those Pac-12 matchups that is memorable. But I will say, guys, like in my assessment of the teams that are really like to look out for, I mean, can Clemson beat Miami? Even though Miami is down, like Miami is still Miami. And that's the one that, again, to me, Clemson is just fighting for, style points and branding and recruiting. And then the other game that I would throw out there that's going to be interesting that you already alluded to, Jeff, was Utah-Oregon. Because that, too, is, again, this is now a game for recruiting. Like, as you get into the end of the season and you're not going to make the playoffs, now is inner recruiting battles on these games because Oregon is going to have some of the Utah recruits at their game. And if they lose, Utah's go bring them back to their campus, be like, you don't want to go to Oregon, we just beat them. You know what I mean? So like, now we're battling for recruiting territory, and if you're not in that top 6, top 7 teams waiting for someone to drop the ball, it's critical that you get the commits that you get by beating the teams that are battling for the same recruits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about local league too. I know there was a ton of action that happened across the state this weekend. Rowan beating UNE, Salvia Regina beats Hudson. Maine loses a tough one to Albany. We thought that one would be a winner, 23-21. Bates obviously gets the best of Hamilton, but the one I think all of us were waiting to talk about, the Bowdoin-Colby game. Bowdoin gets the best of the Mules, 21-14. It was a great game over this weekend.
You know, considering like Colby, this puts Colby in a 500 season, above 500, excuse me, if they beat Bowdoin, puts them outright claim on the CBB. So when you think about like what we're playing for, like they were playing for everything they needed to be playing for to get this done. But that's the power of a rival, right? And Bowdoin, and you know how you want to do the dominoes. Well, if Kobe beat Bates and Bates beat Bowdoin, then that suggests that Kobe should take care of business. But it's all good until the coin is flipped and the ball is kicked. And once that happened, unfortunately, Kobe was not able to come up with it. Now, I don't know how they share the CBB in a 3-way, but
share it. It's a straight up tie.
Straight up tie. So I guess Bowdoin gets the trophy first, and then they rotate it that way.
Who knows exactly how it works? But yeah, no, first time at least I remember in a while that nobody's gone unbeaten here. Everybody beats everybody else. Yeah.
And again, I think there's Bowdoin Bowdoin and Bates were the two teams that were able to get it done this week in Maine. So the segment of Maine got something to say. Bates got a dub, closing it out against Hamilton, which was huge. And Bowdoin had something to say about the Kobe predestined CBB winner. So hats off to Bowdoin and Coach Hammer over there, and hats off to Coach Cone finishing out his season with a victory against Hamilton.
Yeah, ultimately Colby 4-5. Bates and Bowdoin both finished 3-6 this year, so not bad at all. Malik Hall, as always, enjoy talking to you here, and looking forward even more to calling a state championship game with you on Saturday.
Excited, guys. I'm excited. It's hard to win, so we got to keep it local with our wins, man.
You know it. Malik Hall, the host of the Catch Up with Coach podcast and a former college football coach. Thanks for joining us, Coach.
Take care, Bob.
All right. Again, that's Malik Hall talking college football. We'll be right back on Middays with Mannix and Mannix.
96.3.